The RTX 3050. Is it worth the money or is it a waste of your time? Let's take a look. Yo, what up, YouTube? Crash Wilcox, and today we are taking a look at the RTX 3050, NVIDIA's entry level, overpriced, thank you scalpers, RTX GPU. So at this point, we've probably all already seen the gaming benchmarks. And the thing is, if your GPU has DLSS, it's wizardry, it's sorcery. If a card has DLSS, it can game on it, or you can game on it essentially. DLSS is magic, and we should all be immensely thankful for DLSS. But the question remains, can you create content with the RTX 3050? Is it worth the money, the overpriced scalper money, or is it just a waste of your time? So that's what we're going to try to focus on today in this video. And we're going to go through this video sort of the same way that I go through all of my videos. We'll start by taking a look at the specs of the RTX 3050, sort of what makes this card, the things that I think you should care about. And then we will look at benchmarks. We'll go through, synthetic, and I'm going to try to focus them, obviously more on just the power of the GPU, content creation type stuff. But I know you guys are savages, so I will have gaming benchmarks in here as well, because nobody just creates content 24/7. We all got to take some time to jump into Arkesia and run up some hours on Lost Ark. So we'll take a look at some benchmarks. I was going to say New World, but ain't nobody playing New World. Although I was going to benchmark New World for this, and then I was like, why? So the three guys that are still playing it that already... Anywho, moving along. So that's what we're going to do. But in addition to benchmarking this card, I am going to compare a lot of the benchmarks for this with the Radeon Pro W6600. And the reason I'm going to benchmark or kind of compare them with this, kind of for two reasons. One, I own the W6600, so it's easy to use. But more importantly, this is also a 130 watt GPU. The RTX 3050 is a 130 watt GPU. The W6600 is a 130 watt GPU. So I think they're an apt comparison. This is obviously a little more expensive. This card, I think MSRP is for 650 or 700. So in a sane world, that would be drastically more expensive. In today's world, it's moderately more expensive. So that's what we're going to be comparing them to. So what is the RTX 3050? We already mentioned it's NVIDIA's entry-level RTX card, kind of for the first time, bringing the ray tracing to the entry-level stack of their GPU. So that's kind of a neat thing. Let's see. What is this card made of? We can pretend like we care that it has 2,560 CUDA cores. It's got a boost clock around 1.7, 1.8, a base clock about 1.5, 8 gigabytes of GDDR6 memory, which is big. That's a good deal to have 8 gigs of VRAM. It does have ray tracing cores, obviously. It does have DLSS, so I am holding magic in my hand. That is impressive to me. What else? PCIe Gen 4, and again, that's another comparison with the W6600. This is also PCIe Gen 4, so that's a good comparison. This comes with resizable bar support. What else does it have? Yeah, probably the most important is it utilizes NVIDIA's NVENC encoders, which for content creators is the bee's knees, if you will. That's what's so important, right? For most of us is how well NVIDIA GPUs can encode and decode video files and stuff. That's generally what we're working on here. But then also it has an 8-pin power connector. Like I said, it's 130 watts, so it doesn't need a ton of power, which is a blessing, because you don't need a lot of GPU or PSU. You don't need a lot of power supply. It also has 3 DisplayPort outs. These are all 1.4, I believe. And it has 1 HDMI out, which is 2.1. So that is nice. And then kind of funny story here. The reason I have this GPU, the Asus Phoenix single fan card, I was lurking in the shady slums of eBay's used GPU market to find this card. And I was just looking for the cheapest RTX 3050 I could find and made a couple offers on a few, didn't get accepted. And then I, offered on this one and they accepted it. So I just jumped in, paid for it, and then I think an hour or two later, I was like, I wonder what RTX card or 3050 card I actually got. So I'm looking through there and I was like, oh man, I got the stinking single fan card. But at the end of the day, this is probably best because, this is probably a lower tier RTX 3050 in the world of RTX 3050s. You can go with the high end, the gigabyte, like their overclock, their factory overclock ones. And I'll link a video to Tally Hotech. He uses that card specifically in a lot of his game testing, and it games really well. And if you're not watching Tally Hotech, you should, because he's delightful. So I'll link that. But yeah, so if this card performs, then any 3050 that you buy is going to perform, because this is probably the lowest tier of 3050 you can find. So that's good to know. It also comes with a back plate if that matters to you. It's a small card, but as far as build quality, it's pretty solid. I mean, I'm not complaining. Again, you hold it up to a $700 W6600, when you look at just the heat sink, the cooling that's on it, fan size. This doesn't even have a full back plate. Not that this is a slouch. This is a wonderful card. It's whisper quiet, runs cool. So that's kind of what we'll be comparing this to, but that's what makes up the card. So was there anything else worth mentioning on here? No. So now, yeah, we'll go ahead and jump into these benchmarks. And then once we're done with those, I'll come back in and kind of give you my final thoughts of, is this worth your time? Or should you just skip it and hold out and just pray to God that Intel comes through in the end and these Alchemist GPUs are just raining from the sky? So let's get to these benchmarks and I'll see you guys in a few. All right. Well, I hope you found those useful. And just a note on the benchmarks that I use, because I know I use a lot that not everybody uses. And I do that for a reason. The benchmarks that I tend to use are all free. And the reason I use free ones is because everybody has access to them. Stuff like 3D Mark and these ones, while they're not terribly expensive, 30 bucks, but 30 bucks is something to some people. It's not like it's just throwaway money to everybody. So, you know, I don't want to lock benchmarks behind a paywall to where you can't compare what you have maybe against what I did. You can get all the benchmarks that I use for free, compare what you have currently, and then decide, yeah, that is an upgrade worth making. So that's kind of the reason why I use the benchmarks I have. I'll go on the Microsoft store and find benchmarks and just free ones and stuff like that because I think it's something that everybody can utilize. But yeah, so the benchmarks were there, and my thoughts on the RTX 3050. I think if you are a content creator on a strict budget, then this makes sense. I think this is a good card for you. Um, Again, gaming, DLSS is magic. It makes everything work. For content creators, I think if you paired this with a i5 12600K and maybe a B660 motherboard, I think you've got a really nice budget content creation machine, maybe 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and you got a good machine that's going to handle what you need it to handle. I mean, I think a lot of times we can be you know, lured or convinced that somehow we need more than what we really do, because we watch influencers, Linus and Jay's 2 cents and Paul's Hardware and these guys who, I think I saw Jay's 2 cents and his editing machine was like a Threadripper 3970X with an RTX 3090. You're like, you make YouTube videos, right? Maybe a bit overkill, but if Gigabyte and these companies are giving you free stuff to review, then sure, use the best that you can use. But that's overkill for what we're making, a 10-15 minute YouTube video with maybe a couple of videos 4K at the max, some game footage, a little bit of B-roll and some music. Yeah, I mean, you don't need a 3090. You don't need a Threadripper for that. That's overkill. It's cool if you can do it. You don't need it. This will serve you just fine. I mean, you saw in there the DaVinci Resolve numbers. That's a 4K, 10-minute video render in less than 5 minutes. It's not a world beater, but that's perfectly satisfactory. And then I'll just add in here, while this was still in my computer, I rendered out a 4K video that I rendered out at 1080p, but it was an hour and 3-minute video that I rendered out in 7 minutes. That's awesome. That's perfect. I mean, how much better do you need it to be? And then again, like I said, if you pair this with a budget, maybe a 12400, I think that's what it is, the locked version, or maybe even something like a Ryzen 5 5600X, you got yourself a really nice budget content creation machine that can handle what you need it to handle. So yeah, I would recommend this. It would be great in a perfect world where this was still $250 to $300, whatever it is. But even still now, you can get this on the slums of eBay for $400 to $450. And considering, comparing that to the $700 MSRP of a Radeon Pro, I think it beats it. I would rather have this GPU with all it's capable of over the Radeon Pro. Now, I will make note that there's only one thing that I didn't like about this card, and it's probably this specific card, is the fan and the noise. It's not super loud, but it's weird. Like it's a sound at like a decibel range that's just, you hear it and you're like, I don't know, it's not annoying, but you're like, why do I hear that sound? So not the end of the world, depending on where your computer sits or what kind of case you have. If you have a Be Quiet case or something that's really insulated, you're not going to hear it. It runs cool. But overall, I'm impressed. I'm going to take this and I'm replacing my son's RX, I can say this, I know how to speak, my son's RX 590 with this, and it should do well. And then just before I close here, if you guys are curious, talking about budget conscious content creation machines, I'm getting ready to update my content creation computer, which has been using this 130 watt Radeon Pro W6600 with a Ryzen 9 3950X for about a year now, and it's been good. But, praise God, I have enough disposable income that I'm able to upgrade. So I'm going to upgrade, but it's not going to be anything outlandish. So that video will be coming out in the next couple days. So if you're interested, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I'd certainly appreciate it. But all in all, yeah, I would recommend this to a content creator, and I think it will serve you well for a time until you're able to get, some more under your feet and grab something maybe a little bit stronger. But this will do well for you. You'll be pleased. I hope you guys found this video useful. Stick around for that content creation upgrade. But until next time, God bless.